This episode is a companion to my LinkedIn article, Why Performance Management Feels Increasingly Broken. You can find the link to the article in the episode description. Let me start with a confession. Almost all of us have taken part in the same corporate ritual. Every year we sit down with our manager, discuss objectives, align them with team goals, company goals, strategic priorities, and eventually everything gets entered into a performance management system. It feels organized, it feels professional, it feels logical. Then the meeting ends, everyone goes back to work, and something interesting happens. Most people quietly return to pursuing their own goals. Now, before anyone gets offended, this is not because employees are lazy. It is not because they don't care about the company. And it is certainly not because they want the business to fail. They do it because they are human. This matters much more today than it did 10 or 20 years ago. If you work in product management, lead engineering teams, build AI products, or manage any kind of knowledge work, understanding motivation is becoming one of the biggest competitive advantages you can have. Because the old management model assumes something that sounds reasonable, but often isn't true. It assumes that if leadership communicates company goals clearly enough, measures them carefully enough, and connects them to bonuses strongly enough, employees will naturally make those goals their own. But that's not how people work. Let's be honest. Every company tries to motivate people somehow. Better salaries, better benefits, recognition programs, team events, employee of the month, free coffee, maybe even unlimited vacation. None of those things are bad. Money absolutely matters. Anyone telling you otherwise is probably either very wealthy or trying to convince someone else to work for less. But here is where things get tricky. The same reward means completely different things to different people. One employee sees higher salary as financial security. Another sees status. Someone else sees independence. Another person would happily trade part of that salary for more autonomy, better projects, or an opportunity to learn something new. The company believes it is sending one clear motivational message. In reality, every employee hears something different. And that leads to one of the biggest misunderstandings in performance management. The problem is not that people reject company goals. The problem is that every company goal passes through a personal filter first. When leadership announces a new strategic initiative, employees rarely think, how does this improve shareholder value? Instead, they ask much more practical questions. Will this help my career? Will I learn something useful? Will I get more ownership? Will this make my work more interesting? Will this improve my reputation? Those questions are not selfish. They're rational. Every one of us translates organizational priorities into personal meaning before deciding how much effort we want to invest. And I think this is becoming even more important because the nature of work has changed. Many management systems were designed for organizations where success depended on coordinating large numbers of people doing standardized work. Today, many companies depend on knowledge workers, people whose main tools are judgment, creativity, expertise, and problem solving. These people usually know their market value. They have remote opportunities, consulting opportunities, startups, professional networks. AI is making this even more interesting because expertise is becoming more portable than ever before. People are less dependent on one employer to build a successful career. In many industries, employees are no longer trapped inside organizations. They actively choose to stay. And that changes everything. The old management model relied heavily on compliance. The new one depends much more on commitment. Compliance comes from rules. Commitment comes from meaning. You can require people to complete a process. You cannot require them to genuinely care. That only happens when they see that helping the company also helps themselves. This is why I've become increasingly skeptical whenever conversations about performance management focus almost entirely on company objectives. Of course, company goals matter. The real question is whether leaders understand that those goals are competing with dozens of other priorities already living inside every employee's head. Career ambitions, curiosity, recognition, financial security, family, personal values, quality of life, company objectives are simply one more voice in that conversation. Here is one thing I would add that wasn't part of the original article. Sometimes organizations actually punish alignment without realizing it. Imagine an engineer who automates a repetitive process and saves the company hundreds of hours every year. If the reward is more repetitive work, that engineer has just learned a valuable lesson. Or imagine a product manager who successfully delivers several difficult projects. If the reward is simply being assigned even more difficult projects without additional ownership or growth, eventually performance starts to feel like a penalty. People pay attention not only to what leaders say, they pay attention to what success actually leads to. And that's what I would watch most carefully. Not whether your goals are smart enough, not whether your OKRs are perfectly written, but whether high performance genuinely improves the employee's own journey. Because that's where alignment either becomes real or remains another annual ritual. In the end, I think the best organizations don't try to convince people to forget their own ambitions. They do something much smarter. They design an environment where personal success and organizational success reinforce each other. When people move toward their own goals, the company moves forward too. That's much harder than writing another set of KPIs, but it's also much more sustainable. If you'd like to dive deeper into this topic, I've explored it in much more detail in my LinkedIn article. You'll find the link in the episode description. I'd also be interested to hear your experience. Have you seen performance management systems that genuinely motivate people, or do they mostly become another corporate ritual? Let me know in the comments or reach out through LinkedIn.